you guys for joining us. This training is made possible through the Texas State Library and Archives Commission through IMLS, and we're very grateful to have the opportunity to present this for you. Today we have Sara Hayes and Sara Hubert as well, so you get tons of Saras today, and they're going to be talking about the interlibrary loan system because it's going to be shifting over to a new system. And at the end, I'm going to put in a link for a post assessment. So please take that. It helps our numbers and helps us look good so we can bring you guys more trainings in the future. Okay, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Sara. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm happy to be here to talk about the State Library's Interlibrary Loan Program. I'm here at the Texas State Library and Archives Commission, pictured here in the foreground, right next to the Capitol building. If you're ever in Austin, please come to the Capitol complex and see us. So let's get on the show. Today, I'll do some introductions and overview. I'll talk about the program, how it's established, the value of offering interlibrary loan services in your library, talk about the current system, which is Navigator or the Navigator request engine, costs that are associated, and ways that you may be able to recover out-of-pocket costs, developing an ILL policy locally, and the new ILL system that's coming soon. I'll provide information on training resources for interlibrary loan, and there'll be time for questions. And as Sara mentioned at the end, she will provide a link to a survey. So by way of introductions, as mentioned, my name is Sara Hayes. I'm the statewide interlibrary loan coordinator. Snooze this. And I've been in this position about 10 years, and just 2 months ago, we were able to hire an interlibrary loan support specialist. I'm so happy to have Sara Hubert join me in the statewide interlibrary loan program. She hails out of the Beaumont area, so she's familiar with that area and happy to talk to you about it anytime. We're happy to have her. Thank you, Sara. Today, I want to give a general understanding of interlibrary loan as a service with the Navigator system and moving to the ShareIT system and how Texas public libraries use it. And I want to encourage libraries to use ILL as efficiently and effectively as possible by reviewing how you can configure your interlibrary loan system account, why and how to keep your holdings up to date in the group catalog. I'll review some cost savings solutions and provide information on training and support, as well as creating local policies for your ILL services. And finally, I always encourage you to promote these services that you offer to your patrons and community. And that could be on the website, bulletin boards, table toppers, etc. I'm going to start by just defining and clarifying terms you will hear a lot. Interlibrary loan is simply the process which libraries request and supply materials to each other. It's library to library borrowing of materials when those are not available locally for your patrons. I'll be talking about the Texas Group Catalog, and that's currently OCLC's public-facing catalog, it's an OPAC, for searching Texas public library collections. And it is also where patrons and staff can submit requests. NRE, or the Navigator Request Engine, is OCLC's staff interface for managing and borrowing lending requests. And unlike the Texas Group Catalog, NRE does require a staff login. ShareIT is Autographic's ILL system that Texas public libraries will begin using to manage ILL requests in the spring of 2024. And then when I talk about ILS, that's your library's integrated library system. That might be Apollo, Circe, Polaris. There are many of these ILS systems that have modules for circulation, acquisition, cataloging. And while Texas public libraries use a wide variety of integrated library systems, they all use the same system for managing interlibrary loan activities, which is currently Navigator. soon to be ShareIT. So throughout today's talk, when I talk about Navigator, this will also apply to the new system we'll be migrating to, AutoGraphics ShareIT. A little quick overview, I always like to talk about our agency as a whole, the Texas State Library and Archives Commission. It's a state agency here in Austin that has served Texans since it was established in 1909 in meeting their information needs. And our mission is to ensure that citizens have the information they need to lead informed, productive, and fulfilled lives. And we accomplish that mission through these 4 different divisions in our agency. Archives and Information Services preserves the archival record of Texas. It supports research and makes primary resources available to the public. The Library Development and Networking. In Library Development and Networking, we assist public, academic, and school libraries across the state in meeting the needs of their communities and their students. State and local records management is responsible for helping public agencies across the state maintain their records. And that's cities, counties, states, and how and when to retain which records. And then finally, the Talking Book Program, which supports the reading needs of thousands of Texas across the state who may have conditions that prevent them from using traditional print materials. This is a free program. If you have patrons in your community or schools that you think could benefit from the Talking Book Program, please look into it on our website. So as I mentioned, we are in the Library Development and Networking division. And within that, we offer grants and accreditation. So for those of you who have applied for our grants, that's under the LDN umbrella. Accreditation and your annual reports are along with that. We offer a wide variety of continuing education and consulting services for library staff. And then our newest area is technology and the Office of Statewide Digital Opportunity. But we're in the resource sharing program, Interlibrary Loan, and it's one of a handful of resource sharing programs, including the TextShare database program, the TextShare card program, the TextQuest database program for K-12 libraries, and eRead Texas, which is an ebook program. So that is how our agency is structured and how we serve Texans. The Library Development and Networking Division page on TSLAC's website provides links to details about all of the services and programs that we provide to local public, academic, school, and special libraries to help meet the needs of your staff and your communities. That includes training your staff, workforce assistance for your communities, library resources, and grant funding. I've circled a few areas here today that we will talk about, including at the top, our calendar of trainings, which is a great place to go, especially library directors who need to get those CE hours for accreditation. The Interlibrary Loan tab, there's the accreditation tab down below, and then off to the side is where you can subscribe to our newsletters and our mailing lists to stay up to date on what's going on in library development and networking. This is our new Interlibrary Loan page. We're very happy. We've restructured the Interlibrary Loan page, and it includes tabs on the multiple topics that make up the statewide Interlibrary Loan program, including the current system Navigator, the new system that will be ShareIT, the ILL reimbursement program, the statewide courier, and access to trainings and webinars, both past and upcoming. So I hope you'll go out and take a look. Okay, so the Texas Statewide Interlibrary Loan Program. I see my typo already. Sorry about that. The Texas State Library pays for statewide subscription and access to an ILL system for all accredited public libraries through the Grants to States program from our federal funder, the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So all of these libraries, these public libraries, are established as a consortium, a statewide cooperative of libraries that agree to pool their resources, their holdings, their records into one union catalog, and then share those items through Interlibrary Loan. And currently the Texas group, the Texas ILL group, consists of 560 libraries. So that's one of the largest statewide ILL systems in the country. And while the statewide ILL program and system is configured to facilitate borrowing and lending just between the Texas public libraries, it does allow for those libraries who wish to have their requests go outside of the Texas group nationwide if their requests can't be filled within the Texas Public Library Consortium. And every library has the choice, the option to participate on this larger scale outside of Texas. But for state library purposes, we only ask that you borrow and lend with fellow Texas public libraries. If you're interested in configuring your account to either go outside or not go outside, you can let me know and we can confirm how your library is set up. And I want to let libraries know that every accredited Texas public library currently does have a Navigator account set up to provide ILL services to your community. So please contact me if you need login information. I'm happy to provide that. And at this time, maybe you're wondering, okay, great, the state provides this, but what's the value to me in providing this service, to me and my library and community? Because it sounds like a lot of work at first, maybe, but it does get easier. There's never enough time and money. I know that. We just ask you to do what you can. You're not obligated to fill every request that comes into you. And I'm going to provide you some cost-saving suggestions moving forward. And maybe it just looks confusing, and I recognize fully that new things can be overwhelming at first, but practice makes better. You cannot break the system. I'll show you where to access training resources, and I have had many a library call me, and I will talk you through placing a request, filling a request, searching for items. I'm happy to do that anytime. So first and foremost, no library can own every book. It just isn't possible and it's not expected. So that's one major value of interlibrary loan, because we at the state library understand that it's you out there that know your communities the best, and you're developing your collections, your programming, your services to suit your unique communities. But that being said, we just can't always account for what a patron might want to access that isn't available locally for a variety of reasons. If it's checked out, if a book went missing, if a book from a series went missing and they need to fill in that gap. So it helps because you just can't have every book. Then there's cost avoidance for your budget. Using interlibrary loan can cost less than purchasing items new. Even if you buy the book at a reduced cost, it still takes staff time to catalog and process those items for checkout. Shelving space. I talk to many libraries that are able to purchase requested items on demand. If a patron wants something, they just buy it. But at some point, space will probably be an issue. But by using ILL, you can save room on your shelves because you just get to send the item back. And you get to put off weeding and shifting for a little longer. Hard to find resources. Sometimes items are so unique or hard to find or out of print that they're too expensive to purchase. So ILL can be a solution for that. Your collection development policies. As libraries develop their collection development policies, when you're considering the option to either use interlibrary loan or purchase a requesting item, libraries also need to consider their collection development policies because patrons may want items that don't fit into your collection development policies. So even if your library has the money to purchase the item and the space to store the item, maybe your library already has multiple other items on that topic, or the requested item has an older publishing date that you would normally consider, or even topics that that you can't buy under your current policies. So ILL is an alternative way to get the item to the patron. And finally, these ILL statistics show your governing and funding entities and your library boards that you're providing a useful service that the community is using. And I do want to point out that when polled, Texas library staff across the state rated the Interlibrary Loan Program and the TextShare databases as the top value for how TSLAC spends its federal funding from IMLS. And finally, participation in statewide resource sharing using the Navigator ILL system is currently an accreditation standard for Texas public libraries, as outlined in the Texas Administrative Code. And this was determined by a statewide task force years ago, made up by library directors from across the state. And this task force was made up of library directors from large cities and from rural areas and everywhere in between. And it was determined that interlibrary loan is a core service that libraries should provide. And as so, excuse me, as so, it is stated in the administrative code that in order to be an accredited library, an accredited public library in Texas, a library must offer to borrow materials via interlibrary loan and also to lend materials to other libraries as requested. And then it also states that a governing board can adopt policies regarding which of their materials will be available to loan and for how long. That borrower must be in good standing and other issues. So you can make policies about how you participate in the statewide interlibrary loan program. And just to clarify, the accreditation is based on borrowing and lending within Texas. Speaking of accreditation, you can find a lot more information and resources regarding public library annual reports, statistics, and accreditation on the Library Development and Networking website. I work very closely with Felicia Greenwood, and many of you probably know her name. She is my colleague that reports and trains on the annual report that accredited libraries must complete. So to what extent are libraries using this service? Here are our statistics from the last 5 years, and you'll notice a big dip starting in fiscal year 20 during COVID, but it didn't completely stop. We left that up to libraries to be a local decision, whether or not they wanted to continue borrowing and lending items. And I think we all remember there was a time when we didn't know if COVID could be transported through books or not. But you can see our numbers are starting to climb up again after COVID. And in fact, last year, you can see that the items lent come out to about 295 items per day. And Texas libraries borrowed about 460 items per day to serve their communities and patrons. And every library can access your individual borrowing and lending reports in your Navigator request engine by selecting reports from the left-hand menu and then monthly ILL statistics, set your start and end date, and then generate the reports. This is, as I mentioned, great statistics and talking points for when you're asking for more funding or support from your boards or governing entities. And also, if you want to email me, I'm happy to provide you your library statistics as well. So just to reiterate, the current ILL system is made up of two kind of separate components. The Navigator request engine, NRE, is the staff portal that requires a unique login and password for each library. And the Texas Group Catalog, which is available to view publicly by the staff and public, and no login is required until a request is actually made in that system. So NRE is where you're going to be able to view what requests you have for borrowing and lending. You can manage patron accounts, print your shipping labels, run statistics and reports. In the Group Catalog, which is a discovery tool, it's a union catalog of all of the holdings of Texas public libraries. And libraries get to decide if they want their account set up so that patrons can request items directly from the Texas Group Catalog, or if they need to go through library staff in order to place a request. And if patrons are authenticating, they will come to a point in the Texas Group Catalog where they log in with their library card and PIN. So this is a view of the staff navigator request engine page when a library logs in. Libraries go to this web address and enter their library's username and password. You'll see the two work queues here. There's your borrowing requests and your lending requests. And all libraries, regardless of what ILS system you use, will see this same interface when you log in. So you can quickly see what requests need to be processed, as well as monitor requests that you're waiting to get for your patrons. If you're new to this, or you have staff that are new to this, there are many recorded navigator training tutorials available online. And we can also schedule some one-on-one overviews if that will help. Two things you'll notice on the left-hand menu that come in handy are about halfway down, the report a problem link. And this goes straight to OCLC's technical support. It opens a ticket with them. And it doesn't always have to be a problem. This is where you can ask for them to configure your account or ask for assistance with a task. And then a few down from that is the help. And that is where you can search by keyword and come up with definitions and explanations of any of the terms or error codes that you might see. So those are two very helpful links you'll see in your Navigator request engine accounts. And then here is the interface of the Texas Group Catalog, the public-facing group catalog of Texas holdings. No login is required. All of the library participating libraries holdings are available here, as well as academic libraries in Texas. And the search can even be scaled to go outside of Texas to libraries worldwide. You can see here that the catalog defaults to search the Texas Group Catalog or the holdings of public libraries. But if you click the drop-down menu, you can search by libraries all over the country, or you can scale it to the region of Texas.
Oh, we do have a question. How do we know if we have our catalog on Texas Group Catalog?
I can help you with that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the holdings section.
Okay, cool.
And then, yeah, that's a great question. So when you search in this publicly facing catalog, this is a view of the search results. I searched for the Texas Almanac in the group catalog, and you can see my location over there. My zip code determines how my results are presented back to me. So it's geographically by where I'm located. The closest library to me that owns this item is Austin Public Library, a little further out the Wells Branch Library, then Pflugerville. This does not determine how the lender string will be created for library fulfillment necessarily, but it does make it easy for an individual to determine, hey, maybe I'll just go to that library nearby outside of my local public library and get the item there. That might be faster than getting it through ILL or more convenient. And then on the left or on the right-hand side, you'll see that request item button. If your library does allow patron-initiated requests, once that button is clicked, the individual is prompted to enter their authentication, their barcode number, and PIN. And there are protocols in place that go out to your local ILS to determine, is this patron active? Is this patron in good standing? Has this patron already made more? Is this patron at their limit for requests? So it's checking all of that behind the scenes to determine if the request can go ahead and be pushed to NRE for fulfillment. So library holdings, as I mentioned, the group catalog is comprised of holdings from participating Texas libraries. It is essential that the holdings are up to date in order for statewide resource sharing to work effectively. Without updating your holdings, your library might receive requests for items that you no longer own. You've weeded them. So while you're regularly updating your catalog, as you add items to your collection, as you delete or weed items out of your catalog, these changes, while they're showing up in your local catalog, these changes are not reflected in the group catalog or NRE until you update OCLC with the files of items you've added since the last update and files of items you've deleted since the last update. And I do want to mention libraries who use Biblionics Apollo are an exception because that vendor updates holdings with OCLC on behalf of their customers. So it's just ideal when using Interlibrary Loan that you're looking at accurate current holdings and information from libraries. So every library, as I mentioned, has a Navigator account. And in implementing and going live with that account, every library submitted their holdings to OCLC for the group catalog. But that started as long ago as 2011, and we finished implementing libraries in 2016. So that leaves a long time between then and now that that holdings could have gone out of date. So we ask libraries to update their holdings at least once a year, and I'll talk about the ways in which libraries do that. There's several ways that libraries keep their holdings up to date. One is an OCLC cataloging subscription, and I will say that's cost prohibitive for a lot of libraries, but about 40 Texas public libraries use this, and their holdings are updated through that subscription. Cat Express is a copy cataloging service in which libraries can access bibliographic records from WorldCat, add their local data to it so that it reflects that they also own that item, and then save it. This is covered for libraries under our current contract based on their collection size and population served. ILS vendors is another way records are kept up to date. As I mentioned, Biblionics does update records for their customers, and Atrium Book Systems is doing that for some of their customers as well. Moving forward with ShareIT, Biblionics and Atrium will both be updating holdings on behalf of their customers. And then finally, DataSync. DataSync is the service that libraries that don't use any of these three methods to update their holdings use. And I will say it can be laborious to use the DataSync process. It requires setting up a new account with OCLC for a collections management system. So I'm happy to talk to you about that. If you want to contact me, we can get you set up. That being said, we're migrating over the next year, so it might not be as necessary, might not be an emergency for you to do that now until we migrate to the new system. And when I talk about cataloging and holdings and records, I always like to provide these resources. And these are in the Word doc that Sara provided to y'all. And these are just resources for cataloging for library staff that may have not had official training or are new. These are through WebJunction, which provides access to library-specific courses and webinars that are free for Texas library staff. And they have several cataloging courses that might be of interest. Beginning cataloging, the accidental cataloger. So you may wish to check these out if you need some continuing education. And you can access the WebJunction courses under the Library Development and Networking tab and Continuing Education and Consulting. So are there costs associated with Interlibrary Loan? Yes. The Texas State Library does pay for all the access and subscription to the software and systems on behalf of participating libraries, as well as the holdings maintenance, keeping their records up to date. WorldShare ILL allows libraries to borrow and lend outside of the state of Texas. So we cover those access and subscription costs, but we do recognize that libraries are still responsible for some out-of-pocket expenses associated with participating in Interlibrary Loan, including shipping and courier costs, shipping supplies, and staff time. So I do have some suggestions for recuperating some of those costs. The statewide courier, a lot of libraries that borrow and lend at a high number find that it's a better value to subscribe to the statewide courier. And with the statewide courier, you pay one annual subscription cost at the beginning of the fiscal year to have a driver come either 5 days a week, 3 days a week, or 2 days a week. These are the current costs. The state library currently subsidizes libraries about one third of the cost. And so you can see the final cost for libraries after the subsidy. A cost solution, when you're borrowing items for a patron, when a patron says, can you borrow this item for me? That's great, but you're gonna have to pay to get that item back to the lending library. So your policy can include a flat rate fee for patrons, or a flat rate, or the actual cost of shipping the item back, or the flat rate can be up to $4.35, which is currently the cost of sending a 2-pound package through USPS library rate. I know this isn't for every library. Some libraries do not want to pass that cost on to their patrons, but for some libraries, charging a flat fee makes them able to provide the service at all. As a lender, we run an annual ILL lending reimbursement program, and this is completely optional. Participating libraries are reimbursed a flat rate for every lend they make to another Texas public library. You do not need to meet a minimum number of lends. I've had libraries participate that made 4 lends over the year. And it's managed in an online grant system. Libraries have to complete a couple forms, and they access and submit those through the grant management system, which requires an individual login. And it's related, the GMS, it's related, this all happens between May and August every year. For last year, libraries were reimbursed $6.95 for every lend that they made between August 1st and July 31st. The 2024 program will open for participation the week of August 29th, and I will email eligible libraries. I will send messages through our ILL mailing list, and I will post instructions on the ILL webpage. And I always conduct a webinar with instructions and information and time for libraries to ask questions. So this is a great way for libraries to recoup some of the costs for shipping out items to other libraries. And just to clarify, you might lend to libraries out of state. This program is specifically for lends you make to Texas public libraries. I do want to emphasize that libraries do get a say in how your accounts are configured. And OCLC and ShareIT will also be able to do this, can configure your accounts to implement these functionalities kind of behind the scenes. And you can make these requests and changes currently by using that report a problem link in your Navigator request account, Navigator request engine account. So some of these functionalities include who will place the requests, staff or patrons. And then there's somewhere in the middle where patrons can place requests, but they go into a review queue in your NRE account so that you can see where a patron placed a request, but you go ahead and push it out for fulfillment. How many active requests can a patron have at one time? You know, the Austin Public Library here allows 1 at a time. The Texas State Library does have a reference desk that provides ILL services. They allow 5 at a time, and some libraries allow 10 at a time. Libraries get to determine what collections that you will lend to other libraries. And so you think about, we don't want to lend audiovisual materials. We don't want to lend our genealogy or local history collections. So they can set that up so that you won't receive requests for collections that you do not lend out to other libraries. And finally, are you a courier library, and will you borrow from other non-courier libraries? Courier libraries can have their account set up so their requests only go to other courier libraries, so that they go to courier libraries first and then other Texas public libraries, or they can have it just randomized. So in addition to configuring your account to meet the best needs for your library and your library staff, we also want to think about kind of this pyramid of best practices for doing interlibrary loan. Because when you think about it, interlibrary loan is a pretty amazing system. You have libraries all across the country just entrusting their items to another library all the way across the state, all the way across the country. And you know what? For the most part, it's unproblematic. But there are some agreed upon codes, protocols, and policies that if everybody follows them, it works pretty smoothly. So at the top is the Interlibrary Loan Code for the United States. And this is just a system of rules libraries across the country just informally adhere to as they participate in interlibrary loan. Then we have the Texas Interlibrary Loan Protocol for Texas libraries, which everyone just kind of agrees on these accepted procedures and behaviors as part of the group. And then finally, your local policy at your library, which helps inform how you make your decisions locally. The Interlibrary Loan Code for the United States, it's not particularly a long document, so I encourage ILL staff to go out and read that. I've linked to both the USA code here and the Texas protocol here. And, you know, as it says here, it states that these do not override any local policies that you might make, and that they understand that your codes might be either more liberal or more prescriptive than the Interlibrary Loan Code for the United States. And it also emphasizes ILL is intended to complement your good library collections that you have built and managed. It's not a replacement. This code is system neutral, which means it can be applied to any type of library using any ILL system. But it just outlines the common expectations and responsibilities of both borrowing and lending libraries. The Texas Interlibrary Loan Protocol provides additional guidelines for interlibrary loan activities unique to our statewide program. And you can see from the scope statement, this protocol also leaves room for local institutions to develop and post their own local policies. Just a few issues that come up frequently. Books do get lost. That's just a reality, and that can be the fault of, that can be because of misplacing an item by a patron, by the USPS, by the courier. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. And so it's agreed upon at both a national level, a state level, that items that go lost are ultimately the responsibility of the library borrowing it. And they're responsible for that item from once it leaves the lending library to once it's returned to the lending library. And the philosophy behind that is that if a library wouldn't have requested to borrow it, it never would have lost. It never would have left the library. But also the lending libraries do need to notify libraries promptly when materials are overdue, and most ILL systems automatically flag overdue items. And invoices for lost or damaged materials by the lending library should normally follow within 3 months. We've had libraries get invoices for lost items years after an item was lost, and that's kind of hard for the borrowing library to go back and track expenses for. So working together to make that work efficiently is helpful. And finally, your local ILL policies, they really do allow staff to provide consistent and confident service to your public. We all know that what can happen at public service desks is different staff members might treat different situations, might treat the same situation differently. So having a good ILL policy in place kind of ensures that no matter what staff member helps you, patrons will receive the same consistent service. It empowers patrons to use ILL services with clear expectations. And then it allows libraries that you're borrowing and lending with to have guidelines which to base their interactions with your library. To make all of these interactions go as smoothly as possible, written policy is invaluable. When you're creating a local ILL policy, it typically includes kind of three main parts. Your policy should always be current. Easy to say, I know updating policies is not an easy thing to do. Should try to be current, honest, accessible, and approved by the necessary boards or governing agencies of your library. The policy statement talks about why you provide the service and how it aligns with your library's mission statement. The regulations are the rules that govern the process for borrowing and lending. This talks about how does a patron make a request? How many items can be requested at a time? Are there fees associated? Are there restrictions on what you will lend? Do you lend out of state? And then the procedures are finally like the step-by-step instructions for your library staff, an internal document that talks about how staff should be responding to ILL requests. And this always comes in handy, again, easier said than done, when there are unexpected staff changes or outages, or even expected staff changes and outages. Having those procedures in place helps continuity of services. So when you're looking at creating your borrowing policies, you want to talk about whether patrons must be in good standing, whether they must have been a patron for a certain amount of time, how do patrons make requests? Is it through the group catalog? Do you have an online form? Do they need to tell you in person? Will you take emails? You want to say how many ILL requests a patron can have at a time, and if there are associated fees. It's always good to let ILL patrons know that it can take 2 weeks and maybe more for an item to receive it, because for those of us who have worked with patrons doing ILL, their expectations can be pretty grandiose about when they might get these items. So it's good to set their expectations about when they'll get the items. Some libraries won't renew ILL, so you want to clarify that. You want to let patrons know how you're going to notify them when the item comes in. Is it going to be telephone, email? Will they receive a notification through text? There are a variety of different methods. And then you always want to put your ILL contact information, and even if this is just your general ILL or your general library contact information, somewhere that the patrons can get more information or follow up. For lending policies, you'll want to state, again, whether your library lends to only in-state libraries or also out-of-state libraries. Again, how you accept requests. Will it be only through the ILL system? Would you accept a request for scanned or copy materials through email? Specify which collections are available to lend, how long you loan for, and if you renew items, what your fees for lost or damaged items are. Copy policies, again, if you make copies or scans, and again, your ILL contact information. I won't read all of these. They are in the Word document that I sent you. And this is from the Interlibrary Loan Practices Handbook. But as you're creating a local ILL policy, these are those elements that hopefully you can clarify and specify in your ILL policy to make everything go smoothly. And I've also included in the slides in the document some examples of ILL policies from Texas Public Libraries that you may wish to review as you're updating or creating your local ILL policies. It's always helpful to see how others are creating those policies and what they choose to include and specify. And then finally, that internal manual or procedures guide, some helpful information to include in that for library staff or new staff, or the login information for your ILL account or where to find it. Provide the TSLAC website and contact information, and specifically the Texas ILL website. If the ILL system has a training site, OCLC does, and ShareIT also does. How to access and run statistics for reports, instructions on how to update records in your group catalog, and additional procedures for staff. This list are the quick reference guides that are print guides available to use Navigator, and those go over a variety of every task you might need to do in the ILL system, step by step. Okay, so as we mentioned, we will be migrating ILL systems. And why are we doing this? Well, OCLC is retiring the current system, Navigator, from its offerings in the summer of 2024. So we put together a bid. The state requires that you go out for bid, a competitive bid for systems such as this. And after receiving responses and going through internal and external scoring process, the contract for the new ILL system was awarded to Autographics. And it's their new system, ShareIT. Texas Public Libraries will continue to use and have access to Navigator through May and June of 2024, and actually through August, but we'll have to kind of stop making requests and filling requests through Navigator in May or June as we migrate to ShareIT. Functionality that will continue, there's still going to be a publicly available group catalog with the holdings of Texas Public Libraries, still be a staff portal for managing and tracking your requests. Libraries can choose to have patron-initiated requesting if you prefer. I will say the holding maintenance situation is much more streamlined and I think user-friendly for libraries. I know the current system has always been a sticking point for libraries, so we're happy that that will be made, will be simplified for participants moving forward. There will be lots of training opportunities and resources, print resources, recorded tutorials, short that you can watch, live virtual training sessions and in-person training sessions. And libraries will still have the option to borrow and lend outside of the Texas consortia if they prefer. This is the staff view. Earlier, we looked at the NRE staff portal, and here you'll see, while it looks a little bit different, you still see those queues for managing your borrowing requests and managing your lending requests and tracking what status those requests are at currently. And earlier, we viewed the Texas Group Catalog search results. This is a search done in the ShareIT Texas Group Catalog. You also see a list of institutions of where to find that material, and also MARC record displays if that would be useful in your library. And then up in the right-hand corner, you see please log in, and guests will need to please log in with their library card in order to place a request. So again, anyone can search this publicly without logging in, but that login will be required if a patron or staff is going to make a request. So what can you do now as we're preparing? Sara, Hubert, and I are working very closely with the new vendor, Autographics, to build accounts with the data that we have for each participating library. But in the coming weeks and months, we will be requesting libraries to provide us with a variety of information so that your accounts will function as you want them to function. So we ask that you please respond to our emails requesting account and technical information. And at this point, I suggest really tracking down contact information for your ILS vendor, because we are going to be sending out some surveys soon requesting specific information about that system and your records so that it interoperates, so that the system you use in your library has interoperability with the ILL system the way you want it to work. So if you have that ready to go when we send out our next email, probably the end of this week or next week, then it'll be a breeze. And I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of how to access information about the statewide interlibrary loan program and where they can find recorded Navigator tutorials, those quick reference print guides, a link to the NRE help guide and the Navigator support site from OCLC. And those are at that ILL website. For ILL system training, we can do site visits. If you are part of a regional or local consortium that's looking for trainers or speakers for your meetings, please contact me and Sara about visiting with you and your colleagues. And we can also schedule online virtual trainings with your groups. So getting involved and staying updated, once again, subscribing to the ILL listserv. It says here Navigator ILL listserv. It will remain the same, but we'll rename it as we migrate. If you're a courier library, be subscribed to the courier listserv. Library Development Networking has a blog that puts out some informational articles that are really helpful, not just on ILL, but a wide variety of topics. Our continuing education and consulting department in our division just puts together some wonderful resources for trainings. And here's a link to the calendar for that. And then as always, please contact me with any questions or concerns. So here's my email address. We also have a general ILL staff email box down there at the bottom. And there's that link to the ILL webpage. And I think I did it, and I'm happy to take questions.
Feel free to put those questions in the chat and type them out, or you can just say them. Just make sure to unmute.
Can you hear me now? Okay, my question was how to see if we were part of that, where patrons can search under the Texas group.
If they can place requests.
Yes, if they can place requests. And also if our catalog is currently on there, because we've already switched over to Atrium. So hopefully we can have it updated, because we have done a lot of weeding lately. So I just want to make sure my thing is updated.
Great.
If I can go ahead and answer, Sara, I did.
Okay.
You guys are Fort Stockton, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I did some looking and I searched. I was able to find stuff from your catalog in the Texas group catalog right now. And it does say that your last update was done in November of this year. Atrium is great about updating holdings for you. So I think they've been taking care of that.
Awesome. Well, we transferred over in August. So I think that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so is that something that's automatically done, or do I need to stay on top of that?
That should be automatically done. I can confirm that with Atrium. As I mentioned, Biblionics does that for all of its libraries. Atrium hasn't implemented that for every library that it serves, but we can confirm that they're doing that.
Okay. And as far as patrons being able to borrow from there, is that just something we need to just advertise to our patrons to get them started?
Yes. And do you want them to be able to place requests?
Well, as of now, I think some patrons would use it, some won't, but I think that is something we need to discuss.
Okay. Well, we can send you information on how to set that up.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry to interrupt one more time. So you guys filled out the library information form, and within that you had replied no. So if you change your mind and you decide you do want to allow patron requests on their own, just reach out to us and we can adjust that with ShareIT.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ian is asking, when will ShareIT training start?
ShareIT training will start in February.
Cool. And then Barb is asking, where can we view the last update from our ILS to the state catalog?
That is, I would use in your NRE account, your staff account, the report a problem link, and ask if they can provide the date of the last time that files were submitted.
Cool. Thank you. Barb says thank you.
You're welcome. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to the streamlined process of holdings maintenance moving forward.
And I'll send out an email it's going to probably go out in a few days with the link to the document and the slideshow as well. is this YouTube video training once we get that uploaded. So hopefully it'll only take 3 days, but it's going to be a little bit longer than normal. Sandra says, I wanted to ask about children patron requests. Does anyone have any restrictions, limitations, or guidelines for child patrons / under 18 patrons?
I'll just chime in. I don't know if other libraries want to speak, but that is one of the things that is a local decision, and how the vendors can configure that is if the patron status is like minor, juvenile, it's indicated some way, then the ILL system can kind of filter whether or not that particular patron status is able to submit requests. But other libraries can pop in about what's worked at their libraries.
I think I started using the ILL back in high school, I want to say. I can't remember though. Barb says, Sandra, we do not take any ILL requests from patrons under 18. The parent or guardian must place the request.
Just from the information desk downstairs, I learned recently that for them, ILL requests are kind of like patient-doctor confidentiality. They won't give out the information of what the request is to anybody but the person themselves who picked it up. So I think that's a very interesting thing as well to keep in mind as we're thinking about who's picking up requests and who's allowed to make them.
And when I talk about the Navigator ILL mailing list, yes, I send out information to the people who subscribe to that mailing list, but it's a two-way street. I encourage libraries to post to the ILL mailing list when they have questions like this, because you'll get so much feedback from libraries across the state.
I'm also going to go ahead and post the post-training survey in the chat. So please fill that out when you get a moment. It's really short. It just helps us show TSLAC that, hey, we're doing these trainings and this is helping people. So please keep letting us do them.
And you can contact me anytime. And I understand that this wasn't exactly instructing you how to use the ILL, but kind of how to set yourself up so that the program is in place the way you want it and functions smoothly. And like Ian asked, training on the new system will start coming, and the new vendor, Autographics, just has a really robust set of training materials and resources that I'm really excited for Texas libraries to have access to.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Barb says, thank you, Sarah, Sarah P, and Sarah H for all this great information. Looking forward to learning about ShareIT in the new year. Thank you guys for being here. And thank you, Sarah and Sarah, for providing this training. We really appreciate it.
Thank y'all so much. Y'all were wonderful.
Thank you for having us.